When it comes to speaking and persuasion, no one plays at a higher level than politicians. They're the most hated group of people in the entire world, yet they're still able to fill stadiums, build movements, and get millions of people to vote for them over and over again. That is not luck, that is mastery. Because they understand that speaking is not about information, it's about influence. And influence isn't a skill you learn, it's a system that you can replicate. So today, I'm going to break down into simple steps the exact techniques that elite politicians use to move rooms, shift minds, and get people to believe in whatever they have to say. And honestly, if you even apply half of what I'm about to show you today, you will never struggle to hold a room again. With that being said, the first step is to know who you're talking to. If you want to master speaking and persuasion in the same way elite politicians have, you first have to understand who's listening. Because at the highest level, communication isn't about what you want to say. It's about what your audience wants to hear. If you look at someone like Barack Obama, for example, when he was speaking to young voters, his message was built around hope, change, and mainly possibility. Because that's what young people are hungry for. They want a future that they can believe in. But whenever he spoke in front of working families, the entire focus shifted. The focus of his message now leaned towards opportunity and economic security. He always tailored his message to the type of audience that he was addressing. Most people lose the room before they even speak because they're too caught up in what they want to say instead of who they're saying it to. The way you speak on stage is and rightfully should be completely different to how you speak to a friend or to a potential investor. A lot of the times, people struggle with persuasive communication because they say the right things but to the wrong person. So when they don't get the response they want, they think something's wrong with them, when in reality, it's just that their message didn't match their audience. So next time, before you speak, whether it's in front of a crowd or even in something as small as a YouTube video, consider who's actually listening, because you'll be able to tailor the message to the audience that wants to hear whatever you have to say. The second step in learning how to communicate like the elite is to control the narrative. People will always build a story in their head about you, and if you don't guide that story, they'll do it themselves. There's a famous proverb that says, until the lion has its own storyteller, the hunter will always be glorified. Donald Trump is actually one of the greatest examples of this. Even back in 2016, we all knew he had no political experience. We all knew he had no government record or any history holding any position in public office. That should have actually been his biggest weakness. But before anyone could even use it against him, he already claimed it by calling himself an outsider that would quote-unquote drain the swamp. He took what looked like a liability and flipped it into a movement. That is a great example of narrative control. Now, the reason it works so well is because of two things. The first being consistency, and the second being repetition. Now, in rhetoric, that's called anaphora, which simply means the deliberate repetition of a word or phrase to make something stick. Politicians use it, preachers use it, and in fact, the greatest speeches that were ever delivered are built on it. Because when you repeat something with intention, it stops sounding like a point and starts sounding like the truth. People don't need to be taught as much as they need to be reminded, because naturally people are quick to forget. That's why the message that wins isn't always the most intelligent one. As a matter of fact, Newsweek published an article just a few years ago saying that Donald Trump speaks at a 4th grade level. So the message that wins isn't always the most intelligent one. It's the one that people have heard repetitively enough times to believe. If you look at the most memorable messages in modern history, Martin Luther King didn't say "I have a dream" once. He said it 8 times in a single speech. Barack Obama even turned the phrase "yes we can" into an entire national chant. Even Nike consistently repeated the "just do it" phrase for years on end because they understand the power of repeatedly pushing a point to control the narrative. None of those messages are complicated. All of them are unforgettable because of how consistent they were brought up again and again and again. That is the power of repetition, and that is the power of consistency. With that being said, that brings us on to our third step. The third step is to use visual imagery. This simply means that instead of just stating your point, you communicate in a way that creates pictures in the minds of the people that are listening to you. And in doing so, you allow people to feel what you're saying instead of just hearing it. Nobody understands this better than politicians, and that's the reason why they're fond of speaking in scenes. Martin Luther King wasn't just saying racism was bad. He painted a picture of how one day he hoped that black and white children could hold hands at the same school one day. What he did was put people in the scene and made sure they felt it. So before they could even understand what he was saying, they actually felt like they were part of the experience. That is the difference between speaking to inform and speaking to impact. One only reaches the mind, while the other reaches something much deeper. Most people try to persuade by stacking logic, and logic has its place, but logic rarely moves anybody. When you provide a picture of the moment, you're not giving people something to analyze. You're giving them a reality that they can potentially live in. That's what makes it powerful, because the strongest response to persuasive speaking is not when someone argues with you. It's when they arrive at your conclusion on their own. As a matter of fact, Winston Churchill actually used this in his most famous speech when Britain was at the brink of collapse during World War II. If you haven't seen it already, I would highly recommend you check it out. When he was describing how they would fight in the war, he put every person listening inside the fight. They could feel it, they could see it, they knew the weight of it. And a nation that was once terrified became a nation that was willing to participate in one of the greatest wars of human time. That is what visual imagery does. It doesn't just communicate a point, it creates conviction. It moves something deep inside people that logic simply can't touch. So next time, when you're trying to speak persuasively, don't just lead with an argument. Utilize visual communication. Use pictures, because people will forget what they are told, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Now, to help you get a better understanding of the steps that I've mentioned so far, I've attached my completely free communication playbook down in the description below. It's my free gift to you, as well as every single person watching this video that wants to learn how to impact people through what they say. With that being said, that moves us on to our fourth step, which is to create a common enemy. Now, this doesn't mean you actively find someone to hate. What it means is that you give people something to stand against. One of the most powerful truths about human nature is that we're wired for unity, but we unify fastest not around ideas, but around opposition. Giving a group of people a shared enemy is the fastest way to make them forget their differences. That's why there's an English proverb that says that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If you think about every successful political campaign, there's always a villain in the story. There's always a system that's broken or an establishment that's corrupt. It's almost like they're selling a fight, and for some reason, the people are always willing to be a part of that fight. Now, the thing that makes this step so powerful is that the enemy that you give your audience doesn't even have to be a person. It can be a circumstance, it can be a situation, even just a way of thinking that's keeping your audience from where they want to be. When you name it and call it out, people feel seen. They feel like you understand their frustrations, and the moment someone feels understood, they trust you. Ronald Reagan did this exceptionally well. He didn't just campaign against his opponents. He campaigned against the idea of big government, against bureaucracy, against a system that he said was taking more from the people than giving back to them. He gave Americans something to stand against that was bigger than what any person could have imagined. And that is why they rallied around it, because that changed the way that they thought about the political landscape for decades. That is the power of giving people a common enemy, something to rally against, because it doesn't divide them. When used rightly, it actually unites them. So whatever your message is, find the thing that your audience is up against, name it, call it out, and then position yourself as the person standing with them in the fight. With that being said, that brings us up to our fifth and final step. End with a vision. Now, as someone that's had the rare opportunity to meet a few political leaders when growing up, I can tell you with confidence that the greatest communicators never end with the problem. They end with the possibility. It's not enough for people to be moved emotionally. You have to move them directionally, because people at the end of the day need somewhere to go. They need to close their eyes and then see a future that's worth stepping into. Bill Clinton would always paint a picture of an America that's within reach. He made people feel like the future was not just possible, that it was truly inevitable. And every time he spoke, he left everyone feeling like they were a part of something that was bigger than themselves. That is the difference between a persuasive speaker and a vain babbler. A vain babbler will blatantly fill the air with things that you don't even need to hear, whilst the persuasive speaker is someone that will show you exactly where you're going and make sure that you head there. So whether you're building a brand, leading a team, or simply trying to get people to believe in what you are doing, don't just show them the problem. Take them somewhere. Too many people in this day and age speak just for the sake of it, even if they have nothing to say. When you communicate, share the vision, what it looks like, what's on the other side, get specific, and give people a clear picture of where you will take them. Because at the end of the day, the message that you give them is what they will believe. That is what makes them follow, and that is what makes you speak in the same capacity as every single leader that we've mentioned in this video. Now, these are not just political tools for communication, they are human tools, and they work so well because people have not changed. We still respond to the same things that we used to since the Garden of Eden. Identity, emotion, belonging, hope. That's simply why the greatest speakers are not the smartest in the room. They're simply the people that understand people the best. If you want to delve deeper on how to communicate, influence, and build a name that people genuinely trust, there's a link in the description. You can click it. Everything you need there is completely free of charge.